Dear friends, I hope you are well and keeping safe. I'm sure, like me, you are invested in the market either directly through stocks, bonds, equities, or indirectly through a retirement plan like a 401k or college fund like a 529. When COVID was happening, the market was in turmoil. The stocks were going haywire based upon market sentiments. So I thought I'll get some pearls of wisdom from the past and got hold of this book called Maps and Territories. It is written by Alan Greenspan, who is a American economist, very well renowned, and he's also chaired Federal Reserve for several years. This book was written way back in 2010. It's about the 2008 market crash. But there's several lessons I've seen which are directly applicable even in today's day and age. Like I always say, whenever I talk about a book, it's never about the book review. It's more about my learnings and introspection. And I hope you find it useful as well. The first thing that I learned is human beings have this intrinsic behavior known as animal spirits, which is a combination of euphoria, fear, herd mentality, culture, so on and so forth. They play a big role how the financial market works. For example, when there's a rally, we jump in, we buy stocks without even thinking too much. Similarly, when there's selling, despite we know that the most of these stocks bounce back unless they go completely belly up, we still sell because we want to reserve our losses. That's the herd mentality, that's euphoria and fear. It plays a big role in the market ecosystem. Why is this important? Because most of the financial model that we see today are not based on human emotions. They are based on data from the past, a regression analysis done on a dependent and independent variable over a period of time. And it's void of any of those sentiments that drives a culture human from an overall standpoint. So first lesson learned that never look at number abstractly, look at the ecosystem, the market you're playing in, and take all of those into account as well. The second biggest lesson I've learned is, or rather more of a enlightenment for me, is the entitlement that we have in the economy. In the US in 1935, Social Security was started. In 1965, Medicaid was started. These are tools given to old populations so that they can live a good life. So you get a check from Social Security when you're turning 65 or 67. Similarly, when you're old, 65 and above, government takes care of your healthcare expenses, most of it. Now, these entitlement are a big issue from a overall economy standpoint. Why? Because when entitlement happens, the saving depletes because somewhere down in our mind, we believe that there's something that government is going to do for us, so we do not save as much. There are data to prove it. In 1930s, the saving rate of average American was between 10 to 15%. Today, it has gone down to 5%. And there's so much of disparity between the rich and the poor. 94% of this 5% actually come from the top bracket. Why is again this is important? Because gross saving has a direct correlation to GDP. Now look at the number. Social Security and Medicare put together today is about 9% of the GDP, and it is growing at a astronomical rate. It will reach about 14% by I believe 2030, in about that range. And our GDP is growing in about 2 to 3% a year. So imagine our growth of income is not as high as a steep rise in the benefits that you want to give to the older population. It is not going to sustain for a long period of time. That's the biggest learning we have, and we have to watch it very closely. That leads me to the third point, which is the political ecosystem. Politician knows that they have to take short-term pain for long-term goals. For example, Medicare, as an instance, you have to increase your taxes so that you can sustain the growth of health requirement. Or, for instance, you need to take other measures like decreasing the benefit. If I only talk about the financial model per se, but they don't do it because they know that if they do it, it's going to ruin their political career. So their macro level decisions which are made, which has a implication on the overall ecosystem. There's a big lessons we have learned in terms of what government you're supporting and their policies. We should look at those things very deeply. The third aspect that I want to bring to your attention, or the next aspect I want to bring to your attention, is about what I call it as too big to fail. When 2008 market crashed, this is not the first time it has crashed. It has crashed before. Market crashed in 1987 and the dot-com area in 2000. But the market recovered quickly. There were losses, yes, but it was not at the degree and the volume that happened in 2008. Why? Because by 2008, It was more driven by mortgages. I'm not going that in detail, but subprime loan was big. There were financial instruments written, and then there's shadow banking, which was at a growing rate. What happened at that point in time is that the leverageability of the financial institution was very much, everyone was making money, was in a race, and what they did was they bought different subprime mortgages, and they were very neatly linked to each other without people knowing. And when one crashes, there's a domino effect of the other crashes as well. So the next big lesson I've learned is that in the new market ecosystem that we live in, the dependencies are way too much. And it is very important for us as individuals to understand when we are investing in, let's say, an equity or a bond, to understand what are the implications that we have from overall standpoint. We may not have it in control, but it is very important. And similarly, it segues me into some of the aspects of government taking calls, like too big to fail. They're supporting the ecosystem by funding, feeding them money. Uh, there's something like market correction. The best survives, like the Darwin says, survival of the fittest. That is very important rather than feeding in money, because if you cannot survive in the ecosystem by feeding in money, you are just taking taxpayer money and putting in the wrong side of the equation. So, as an example, in 2008, as the banks were given loan, there was a apprehension not to take loan as well, because they were thinking that if we take it, we have that second-rated banking statement, banking from the overall economy standpoint. And what happened was the government then forced banks like JP Morgan, who didn't want fund, to take funds so that everyone on an equal play. So the next question that I come is, how much of involvement the government should have in a financial market, or should it be corrected by itself? I do not have an answer. I believe that market should correct by itself, but it's something for all of us to know. And that segues me into some of the other private sector bailout they did for Ford and GM and all. Here comes the innovation part. If you are not able to survive in the ecosystem by what you have devised and defined years and years back, you need to bail out. You have to give space to new. We have seen that time and again, how the camera companies have gone out, like Kodaks and others, when iPhone and Samsung made cameras as a part of the phone. Similarly, Nortel completely going out when the Avaya and other kind of companies came into play. Innovation is key, and it is very important that if you do not give space for companies to die, or if they are not re-innovating themselves, not giving space for the other companies to come in, we are going to feed into a dead horse, which is not going to support the market for a long period of time. For instance, in 2008, when the market crashed, the Fed took a decision that short selling was not going to happen. They are stopping the short selling, but that didn't help the market at all. I mean, this selling did happen, and there were losses, we all know, in billions and trillions of dollars that happened. Leading my point from innovation, it is also very important to understand that when innovation can be really applicable in a particular society, culture, or ecosystem. As an example, when electricity was developed or discovered or invented, I'm sorry, invented by Thomas Alva Edison, um, everyone thought that this is the boon. All the factories in the Midwestern region in the US will go and adopt it, but they did not. Why? Because there is a intrinsic change that they have to do in the layout of the factory itself. The factories are floor based because they are driven by turbine, and the power has to come from top to the bottom. And in the newer world, you do not need that kind of structure. You can have a flat structure, and it took about 3 to 4 decades for electricity to come completely into play to replace the capital investment. So it is very important that when you see innovation, let's not straightway jump into it. See the ecosystem around it. Can it support that innovation so that it can truly materialize? Similarly, if you see Forbes, I believe in 2016 or 2014, listed a top 100 innovative company. 45 of them are from the US, none from China, though in China economy is growing at a very faster and a higher pace, both GDP wise as well as the overall economy contribution that they're doing. Why? Because again, the culture, there's a very hierarchy driven culture in China, and innovation doesn't need boundary. And moment you have boundary, a validation board for everything that you do, innovation kind of curtails. So again, you have to understand the cultural aspect as well as you're trying to invest. So do not jump in just because there's innovation. Do not look at the patent filing history and then look at, oh, there are 50 patent filed this year, so I should invest in, let's say, tech companies because they are going to leverage those. Don't do that unless you understand the ecosystem well. That's the next lesson I have learned. The final two now. The next one I want to highlight is about buffers. We all have buffers in our individual life as well. We have a savings account or a bank account where we have buffer money so that in the emergency we can use it. Similarly, countries also needs buffer for once in a lifetime situation like the COVID pandemic. Who would have thought we would have hit by a pandemic like this? But you need funds for a situation like this. Or the the military, for example, in the we know in today's day and age we may not need a warship to fight, but who knows, right? Because in today's world it is more internet, more more information driven war. But you may never know, tomorrow you may need a warship, and then investing in those military equipment is important. And then it's a fine balance to see that how much of that money from GDP or from your overall growth should go into defense forces, to should go into bridges and different capital investment that you want to do to make sure that you can grow accordingly, right? And you can protect your borders accordingly. You can create ecosystem to thrive and survive. These are very important aspect from a macro standpoint. Very important to understand as you understand the market dynamics from a global standpoint. Last point I want to highlight is about dollars. We all know how powerful dollar is. It's the only currency in the world which can be exchanged. You can go and exchange dollar in any country, any form and shape they will accept it. Euro came very close, but Euro had their own challenges because of the spread out countries and some of the challenges that they have in the country themselves, and some of the socialist kind of aspect that Eurozone kind of promotes. Similarly, the other country which is trying very hard is China. China has $4 trillion reserve. One of the hypotheses is probably they'll buy a lot of gold, and if they buy gold, what will happen is gold prices will go up. But once they buy it as a reserve, then what will happen? The gold price will go down. So they may not do it, but they've been trying hard to make their currency as a globally accepted currency, if not replacing dollar, but a distant cousin, so to say. So, but to understand this, it's very important that gold and dollar are two very important aspects. As long as you are tied to that ecosystem, as long as you know that those are the boundaries to call for, you are in good hands. So I will leave you with this thought. I hope you found it useful. I'm sure I learned a lot. I will highly recommend, if you have not read the book, to read it. It's again, the book name is Maps and Territories, written by Alan Greenspan. Hope you enjoyed what you have heard, and as always, feel free to leave behind your thoughts, comments, and any other agreement or disagreement you may have. Thank you. Take care now. Bye.